2 years ago, I decided that that summer I wanted to visit the place that was high on my bucket list, Greenland. So I got on a plane to Copenhagen, and from Copenhagen I flew to the International Airport of Greenland. And I can tell you, that's probably the smallest international airport out there. There are no roads, there are no trees, there's just a handful of people. But I had one very special thing. Because when I stepped out of that airplane, this is what I saw. An absolutely beautiful, stunning landscape full of ice and snow, something that I've never ever seen in my whole life. But I did not just go there to take that beautiful holiday picture. I went there to join a Glacier expedition. Because together with a group of 16 scientists, we would spend 1 month in remote Greenland to study that glacier for effects of climate change. So in the first week when we got there, we had a week of preparation. So we gathered the food for 1 month, we tested the tents in which we would sleep, and we tested our equipment, whether they were working as they should be. And we had a safety training, because obviously the area that we would go into would be pretty hazardous. So after that week of preparation, we loaded everything onto a boat, and the boat finally dropped us off in this remote fjord. And that was it. For 1 month, we will be completely alone. So in the first day when we arrived there, we set up our camp, prepared the final things, and from that moment on, every day we would hike up towards this glacier, which was about 2-3 hours of a hike away. And every day when we got towards that glacier, we climbed on top of it and we did our measurements. And what we did there was we probed the ice for its thickness, and by doing that at different locations and at different times, we can say something about how climate change is affecting the area over there. And if you look closely at that picture, you see 3 small dots in the middle. That was us. And this is an experience I will never ever forget, because this is probably the most beautiful office space anyone can ever have. So after these long days of hard work at the glacier, we often walked back towards the camp, and we were so tired that we often took a nap, we relaxed a little bit, we had food, and then went straight to bed. And this was our camp. It was down in the valley, and we had 2 big white tents in which we stored all our stuff. And the tents that you see around it, those were the tents in which we slept. An absolutely amazing experience. So 1 day passes, 2 days passes, a week passes, 2 weeks, but in the 3rd week, something happened. After a long day of hard work at that glacier, we walked back towards the valley, and from the distance we saw thick clouds heading towards the camp. So we got a little bit worried, and our camp leader, he gets on the satellite phone and he calls back to the people in the village, and he asks, guys, can you tell us a little bit more about that storm? And the guy on the other end of the line says, better prepare yourself, because this is a big one. So our camp leader, he gets off the phone, we have dinner, and then he says, let's prepare ourselves, there's a storm coming. So we tied everything down, made sure everything was secure. We put somebody to watch the tent at night, and the rest of us went to bed in the smaller tents, hoping somehow that that storm would not be so bad. But it was. Because that night, in the middle of the night, we were violently woken up, everybody out, now! And then full of adrenaline, you wake up, you look outside of the tent, and the first thing you see is 2 guys hanging onto those big white tents that is all our stuff. And through the wind, the rain, the storm, you could hear them scream, get some stones, get some stones. So with all the adrenaline you have in your body, you pick up the biggest stone you can find, you put it on top of the tent just to make sure it does not fly away. And while we were doing that, the second tent is hit by a gust of wind, and that one was even more important, because it had all our food and cooking equipment. So we rushed towards that tent as well. We put stones on top of it, but it wasn't enough. And at that moment, we decided just to take down the tent. It was simply catching too much wind. And for 1 hour, we battled the storm, but you have to imagine that was all we could do. The storm kept on going, but we were powerless and decided just to go back in the small tents that were still standing up and do an inventory the next day. So the next morning when we woke up, it was calm. The storm moved away, but it left its marks on the camp. Everything was wet, the tents were down, and at that moment we decided that it would be better to just rebuild the camp and forget about the mission for today. So somebody volunteered and he said, let me rebuild the tents so that we can store our stuff again. And somebody else volunteered and he said, let me go find some food, maybe some fish, so that we have a proper meal at the end of the day. And somebody else volunteered and he said, let me build a fire and a structure so that we can dry our stuff. So everybody went to do something, and by the end of the day, the camp was fully rebuilt. We had food in our bellies, the tents were up, and we built a campfire to warm ourselves. And at that campfire, we were discussing sort of the irony of the situation, that climate change, the reason why we were there, might have actually aggravated that storm. And then it hit me. Because what we experienced that night in Greenland is the same thing that the world that we here today are also experiencing. Because just like we were hit by this massive storm, the world is currently facing multiple storms, climate change. And just like that storm almost destroyed our house, climate change is destroying houses all over the world. You can think of the people in Bangladesh that have to move because of sea level rise, or the people that suffered from Hurricane Katrina and that have to rebuild their homes. But that realization, it did not make me feel sad, it made me feel positive, because that night I also saw the solution, and that is the power of collaboration. Because by working together, all doing small things, helping each other, we were able to rebuild that camp that was destroyed. And what we have to realize here today is that we are also part of a camp that I like to call Camp Earth, with also a bunch of people working together and facing a massive storm. But we all also have the opportunity to contribute to that renewable solution and rebuild our energy infrastructure to be better again. So this is as far as my example goes. And you might wonder, well, that was 16 people. How on earth are we gonna work together, all those billions of people that we have? And that's true. It's very difficult to have all those people work together towards that renewable future. But I also believe that within this story are embedded some principles that also very much apply to our society today, from which we can learn, and that will help us understand why and how we all can work together towards that renewable future. And the first of those elements I would like to call the phone call. Because one night before the storm hit us, we received a phone call from the people that were watching those radar screens. And they said, guys, you have to prepare yourself, there is a storm coming. And we, in our society, have received that phone call as well, from scientists, from climatologists, that have discovered that our planet is changing, that we are simply putting so much CO2 into our atmosphere that we're creating a blanket over our planet, and that results in global warming, changing weather, more storms, more heavier rainfall. But after we received that phone call, our camp leader, he rallied everybody together and says, guys, we have to prepare ourselves. And the great thing is that recently this happened in our society as well. Because our camp leaders, our world leaders, they came together in Paris and they said, we will mitigate climate change at 2 degrees, and we will even aim for 1.5. And I'm passionate about this topic, that's a great achievement, to have all those world leaders, those camp leaders come together and agree on a goal that we have to make. But those settings, they also come with implications. Because if we all together want to reach that 1.5 degree for the planet in which we all live, that means that in 2050, and that's in 30 years from now, we need to be off carbon. In 30 years from now, we need to be off carbon. And it's a massive challenge. And I know it, I'm an engineer, I love numbers, but the problem with numbers is also that they're often quickly forgotten. So for us as a society to really know what climate change is about, we have to experience the storm. And in that lies a problem. Because face it, we don't want to experience that storm. We don't want to experience climate change. And the problem with climate change is that it's something that is happening in the future, far away. And we as humans find it very difficult to adapt to that. We respond to tigers, spiders, threats that are quick and immediate. But climate change is happening far away, and especially here in the Netherlands, we don't feel it, right? But let me tell you, let me go back to those people back in Bangladesh. Those people that suffered from Hurricane Katrina. Those people that also live in our camp, they do already today suffer from climate change. And honestly, that makes me really sad, because that's the world I grew up in. But then again, I do not stand here today to promote to you a negative story, because I also believe that doesn't help. And honestly, I'm actually really positive about the future that we are going towards. Because the best thing about this problem is that we already have the solution. We have it. And that's very unique, because a lot of the world problems that we face today, they don't have already immediate solutions. And that solution comes with a vision that in 30 years from now, we want to be renewable. And the best thing here in Eindhoven, but also in other countries abroad, we already have those technologies that can make that happen. We have solar, we have wind, we have hydro. And the best thing about this future, about this vision, is that the solution is no longer top-down, coal-fired power plant to us consumers, but it's collaborative already in its design. Because the smart grids that we will apply in the future, they will allow all of us to work together and produce, share, store, and use our energy in a sustainable way. And that is very unique. And the best thing about this future vision is that it empowers all of us to be part of the solution. Because that morning, after the storm hit us and we fully realized the impact of the storm, all of us in the camp in Greenland had the opportunity to contribute to the rebuild of the camp. Somebody rebuilt the tents, somebody got food, somebody built a fire. And just like that here today, we have to realize that we all can contribute to the solution. For instance, as consumers, you can decide to put solar power on your rooftop, change energy supplier, or maybe even something as simple as changing your bank account to a bank that invests in sustainable energies. All small things, but together amount to something big. Or in your company, you might wonder, well, address it in the next meeting. What can your company do to accelerate that future to renewables? What is that impact of that collaborative vision that it has on your company tomorrow, or maybe 5 years from now? Or even as a student, because I see a lot of students here today. You can join student teams and work on the cutting-edge technologies for tomorrow. Or even join debates that happen in your city. And I can tell from personal experience, those are awesome things to do. And that brings me to my final and maybe the most important point of my speech. And that is the campfire. Because after we in Greenland rebuilt our camp, we were happy, we celebrated our success. And just like that, I believe that with all the small things that we can do for our society, we should be happy and positive about the impact that all those small things together have. Share it with the people around you. Try to get them on board. Because in the end, we need everybody. From the scientists that warn us, from the camp leaders that take the initiative, from the engineers that make our future vision, all the way to us consumers. And once we tap into that power, the power of collaboration, then I'm convinced that we can battle any storm. Thank you.